educate your shippers. If
Yeah.
they're not doing anything on their end,
Yeah.
help them with those types of things.
Agreed.
Especially if you're moving high theft commodities. You want to talk about adding value to your partners?
Right.
Help them with their screening process at their locations.
On the last episode, we talked about theft, fraud, and a lot of the issues in the industry. Today, we're going to talk about carrier selection, how to prevent those types of issues from happening, and also leveraging technology.
I think this is one of the hottest topics in our industry, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, especially with a number of organizations not taking that much action to combat these issues. You were down at TIA last year.
Yeah.
You brought back some very eye-opening statistics.
Yeah.
Share your experience, some of those statistics, and how that impacts us.
Yeah. So one of the things that we heard from a couple of the attorneys and legal counsel that were doing
Real quick, and I'm sorry, TIA. What for anyone that's not
so
familiar?
TIA is Transportation Intermediaries Association. It's an organization based in Virginia, right outside of DC. It's something that we're involved in with the brokerage side. It's for brokers only. It's an organization that teaches best practices, how to become a broker, different training courses, different education materials to have success as a broker.
And they have an annual
annual, it's called the Capital Ideas Conference. Last year it was in Orlando. They do it once a year. They usually get, anywhere between, 1,500 to 2,000 companies that are down there to attend. And a lot of people are looking for advice, or how do I run my brokerage better? Or how do I handle theft or fraud better, right? I think those are things.
That was heavily discussed.
Yeah, I think that was every panel, right? Everybody wanted to talk to an attorney about something, even like the sidebar conversations. But yeah, they had a panel on theft and fraud, and they were talking to, or one of the attorneys that was up there, he was talking about a discussion that he had with one of these scammers, and what they did is he was talking to the scammer. The attorney said, I'm going to shut down this MC. You're not going to be able to run under this MC. Well, the response back was, that's fine, no problem. I have 250 more MCs that I can run with, right? Which is alarming, right? I mean, I think to me, that's scary, especially when you have somebody who's so active in the fraud and theft game that has this many more MCs that they can actively go and try to get a fraudulent shipment.
Why? Where? How are they getting all these MCs?
Yeah, so there's a little regulation about getting an MC, right? Literally, you have to go online. You have to apply with the FMCSA. I think it's $350 to get your authority. They do, a check on your address and the type of company that you are. Since then, I will give them credit. They have, tightened up the reins a little bit from last year at this time. But before, they were just processing these things like crazy. And you would get a lot of these scammers that would be able to, provide information. They put up the $350 for an application, and now they're authorized to haul freight anywhere in the U.S.
So it's basically like putting entrepreneur in your Instagram.
Pretty much,
profile.
Yeah. You can do whatever you want, right?
So
as long as you pay $350. Yeah,
So it's safe to say there's little regulation around this, zero pre-screening. Just open the floodgates, let the scammers in.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're taking measures now, right? 2023 was a bad year as far as theft and fraud, and they're taking more measures now than they used to. But yeah, it used to be a free-for-all. Anybody could apply. You could repurpose an MC without a ton of documentation, right? And that's where the challenge comes in, is you get people from overseas or operating in different countries that fraudulently take the identity of a owner operator from Houston, Texas. Now they say that they're this person. It used to be a game of, is this carrier decent, or do they do a good job with the service level? Nowadays, when we talk about carrier selection, it's literally, are you who you say you are? Right. And that's a big question, right? Like when we're setting up new carriers, and, I think we'll get into this a little bit later, but I think there always needs to be a precedent on that. Like using repeat carriers is going to help you out as a company. Going back to, are you who you say you are? Making sure, from a carrier selection perspective, I'm going to back up a second. When I have a shipment for the client that's currently paying our bills today, what kind of carrier am I using? Right. And making sure that I'm not using somebody that is associated with fraud or has any history of unethical practices. Right. I think there's a couple different technology providers out there. I know there's a couple technology providers that have come up in the last couple of years that have been huge for the advancement of our industry as far as carrier selection.
Yeah, I know Highway, Go Highway.
Yeah.
We partner with them. And I think even from the shipper side of things, you want to feel good about who you're working with in their process when it comes to screening carriers.
Yep.
The thing that pisses me off more than anything is that you have these scumbags out there who are wreaking havoc in the logistics industry.
Yeah.
You have hardworking individuals, owner operators who drive cross country and they don't get paid by one of these scammers.
Yeah.
You have brokers who get sunk because they cut a corner or took a risk, and you have a scammer that steals $100,000 worth shipment from one of their clients, and now the broker is in a tight spot and they lose business from a client who they've worked with for 5 years.
Yeah, it's a bad deal. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part is now we have to pour more resources into combating these types of behaviors. But when you look at it, if I'm running a small business, a small brokerage, or any brokerage really, what are some things I can pay attention to?
Yeah.
What are the huge glaring flags? And then we can get a little bit more granular with it, but like, what are the glaring flags that you're looking for when you're screening a carrier?
Yeah. So the first thing, I want to make sure, just like I said a few minutes ago, you are who you say you are, right?
And how do you verify that?
Well, I think a couple of things. So if they're calling in or emailing in from the right area code, their email has a domain name like their company, right? Or if it's associated with their company and what they filled out on the FMCSA.
So like at gmail.com.
Well, that's a red flag,
Correct.
right? So like
Correct.
at Gmail, which is all too common in our industry, right? Like we have lots of carriers that have a Gmail account and they use it as their company. It might be ABC Trucking Company at gmail.com. Well, they're ABC Trucking Company, but the Gmail scares me, right? And, there are a couple different items where if we have a driver, we'll just call him driver from Houston, Texas, and he's picking up a load in Seattle, Washington, and he's taking it to Chicago, Illinois, that's a red flag to me. Like what usually you see drivers pick up a load, they take it back home, they pick up a load at their home and they take it somewhere else, right? So like anybody that's kind of like out of the loop or not really driving in an area or a common lane for them, to me, that's a red flag. I also think, lack of communication from a carrier, right? If you try to call them, they don't answer. You try to email, it takes them 30 minutes to respond. In our industry, that's a long time. Right. So, and I also feel like this might be our subconscious talking to us, but anytime that we talk to somebody over the phone and we just feel and we just know that something doesn't feel right. Right. Even like you said, like, what are some common themes? And I think you mentioned this on the last show, but if you're offering a rate of $3,000 and they take it right away, like red flag.
They
right?
suck at negotiating.
Right.
Or
no.
they're about to steal your load.
I mean, I've been doing this for a very long time and probably on like less than 1% of carriers take that first rate, right? So they're always trying to negotiate, whether that's $200 more or $100 more. So those are things that, we can all do to try to, help combat it. One thing I think that we all can, help our shippers out with. Our shippers need to do a better job on the verification process as well. You see some of these, man. I had unfortunately, I had a load stolen a couple years ago, and we looked at like the check-in sheet at a shipper, like prominent shipper in the U.S., and literally all you had to write down was the carrier name, the driver name, and then what your pickup number was. 3 columns, and I'm like, that's all you had to do to get a shipment. Right. I mean, like to me, we have a client of ours today in Chicago. They do a phenomenal job. And is it a little overboard? Maybe. But they do driver picture. They do a driver's license check. They do a driver trailer check. They go out there and snap a picture of the actual truck. Right. So it's like the 5-step process. But, they're trying to combat fraud because their loads are high value.
And I think from the broker, if I could give some advice, the red flags. What is your operational checklist? What are you paying attention to? But also educate your shippers. If they're not doing anything on their end, help them with those types of things.
Agreed.
Especially if you're moving high theft commodities. You want to talk about adding value to your partners?
Right.
Help them with their screening process at their locations. But you mentioned a few things when it comes to screening. I want to add a couple.
Yeah.
Gaps in authority.
Yeah.
So a lot of times,
what do you mean by gaps in authority?
If they've been operating for 2 years, you see a 6-month gap, and then you see they're operating again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, was that MC and authority purchased?
Sure.
If you look at the carrier profile, we have a number of databases that we won't get into today.
Yeah.
But if you look at their profile and they're operating for X amount of years in Seattle, Washington, 6-month gap in history, active again, but they're operating out of Houston, Texas now, and the phone someone bought this MC.
Yeah.
They've been active for a month. Probably need to steer clear there. So gaps in history, IP address.
Yeah.
Where are they operating from? You can run their IP address online, see that they're in Istanbul or wherever, and they're not active in the United States.
Sure.
Virtual addresses. Is their physical address an actual address, or the address that they provide an actual address, or is a virtual address they paid $90 a month for?
Well, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think when you talk about the virtual address, a lot of what we've seen and how to combat that is if you go to and it's kind of like getting a PO box without it saying PO box, right? So they'll go into UPS store, and UPS is what they'll have is you go in, you want to buy rent one of their boxes for $90 a month, like you're talking about. It'll say 123 Main Street, but their box number is going to be the suite number, right? So it's 123 Main Street, suite 201. All that means is that they are, box number 201 for some physicality of their address. So, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because not only is it, people steer clear, we're not doing anything with PO boxes, but be on the lookout for any type of UPS store as a physical address. Or hell, I love the IP address scenario, because anybody that's in Turkey or in, Kazakhstan or whatever, what are you doing there? Right? What you need to ask more questions and confront those people, because they're probably about ready to steal your shipment.
Yeah. And I have nothing, full disclosure, I have nothing against Istanbul.
No, actually, I don't.
But no, we do a lot of things that help protect us, our clients, and our carriers. There's a lot more work that needs to be done to fix some of these issues in the industry.
Yeah.
But knowing your process, knowing your checklist and what red flags to look for, that is the best way you can prevent these types of situations. Mm-hmm. But they continue to evolve. So we have to evolve as well.
Agreed. Just kind of a note for brokers out there, a note for logistics companies. In this market, right, where, carriers, trucking companies are easy to come by. If it's a tricky scenario and you have some questions or you have some red flags, I would take the side of caution, right? Where, you know what, I'm not going to get myself into this scenario and potentially lose $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 worth of freight, for a potential, client.
We want to hear more about your all's processes. Let's put together the bulletproof carrier screening protocol. If you know someone or work for a company that you believe has an awesome, thorough process, drop that in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you're coming out of the gates firing away with a sales pitch,
right,
when you don't know shit about them,
no, it's exactly
they're going to hang up on you because you don't know anything about them. So how are you knowing what to sell to?